Richard Kadrey is the author of more novels than I have time to explain, but let me just mention he's the author of the entire Sandman Slim series. His new series is the Ford and Neuhauer Noir Mysteries, and they include The Pale House Devil and his newest book. Oh my God, my brain is just,
It's the Flesh King.
yeah, okay. And his newest book is The Flesh. Let me just redo that because my son has to cut this shit up.
No problem.
Richard Kadrey is the author of more novels than I have time to recite here. He's the author of the Sandman Slim series, and his new series is the Ford Neulander Noir Mysteries. They include The Pale House Devil and The Flesh King. Thank you for joining me, Richard.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You know, as I read this book, I loved it. I thought it was so beautiful, and it took me back a few years when I was first getting really super addicted to buying and reading really exquisitely produced books, and I came upon these books by Dennis Macmillan. He was
Hmm.
a publisher of old, very old mysteries.
Mhm.
And that's what this book took me back to. And the first one as well. And I began to think that you, I think, beginning with Sam and Slim, are the king of the new, what I would call the monster noir genre.
I like that. I'll take that. Sure.
And I think there's a lot of similarities in the writing, the plotting to the original noir, but also I think in the origination, in that the original noirs, beginning back in the 40s with Cornell Woodrich,
Hmm. Great
um,
writer.
great writer, were, coming out of the Depression, the financial time war. It was really tough until World War
Hmm.
II hit. And even then, it was tough, but there was a little more unity in the matter. Uh, it was really tough financial times that gave birth to this noir
Yeah.
genre because people found themselves when times are really tough, you find yourself doing things that are maybe against your morals. And so the whole noir genre, which is based around people who are somewhat amoral and not, the greatest people in the world, yet still manage to somehow struggle through. Um, that's natural. We now are in equally tough times, and we have in Ford and Neulander and Tilda some equally tough characters. Talk about the influence of noir on your writing from Sandman Slim and into this new series.
Well, noir has been very, very important to me. One of the things you just mentioned is people doing things they wouldn't normally do because of extenuating circumstances. But also, I see it as something people who've been broken
Mm.
through circumstances. And you mentioned the Depression, you mentioned World War II, all of that plays into it. And I definitely see that with certainly Sandman Slim, especially. It's a very class conscious series. I mean, it's about monsters and hell and the devil and angels, but there's also Stark lives in Hollywood among the elite and movie stars and movie producers and the rich sub rosa clique. And he's very aware of what it's like to be among them when you're basically a street level person. So, and a lot of his actions are dictated by those people because they're in charge. He's often blackmailed earlier in the series and pushed around, tries to do his best, but sometimes, yeah, what you said, sometimes he acts against his own and other people's best interests, but then tries to course correct along the way. Same thing with Ford and Neuland in the new books, the Discrete Eliminator series. They are basically just guys with a job. They're hitmen. One is alive and one is dead. And they're basically, just they're Uber drivers, they're just guys who do pick up jobs along the way. And if there's no work, they don't get paid. They're basically
They're living paycheck
what
to
is they're
paycheck, like
gig
many
workers.
of
They're
us.
they're gig workers. That's the phrase I was trying to remember.
One of the things I really love about the series is how stripped down the novels are. I mean, they're the noir genre is often compared to and shares some traits with hard-boiled fiction,
Mhm.
and I would suggest that your prose almost seems like you put it in the boiler for a while to boil away every single stripped out word. Is
Yeah.
it? I mean, are there versions of these books that are twice as long?
Well, I changed my writing style pretty much with each book.
Mm.
Sandman Slim is a stripped down series. It is a minimalist writing, but it's much more elaborate. Stark, is a sees himself as a very simplistic guy, but he's not. He has a lot of interesting thoughts in terms of phrase along the way. When I did Palehouse Devil and The Flesh King, I wanted to bring things down to the simplest level whatsoever. And so I just stripped away everything that I felt might be superfluous, that might get in the way of any of the dialogue, any of the action, any of the setting. I really wanted to bring this thing down to the bare bones. And maybe that was Barry Gifford's influence. He's a writer I enjoy a lot. He's most famous for
Oh,
Wild at Heart,
sure.
but he's written a ton of other stuff, and I really enjoy the way he just um, writes things. They're almost skeletal at times in terms of their prose, and I really like that. And when I decided to do this series of novellas, that style seemed to fit. And again, to have these hitmen characters, I like the idea of stripping things down because they see the world in uh, a simpler way than a lot of other people. They have their own moral code, but the world they live in for the most part, is very black and white, and they have to navigate that. So I wanted to reflect that in the prose and just bring things down to their simplest form.
One of the things that I love about this book, the newest book, is that right on early on you get to a scene that I've found as a written scene fairly disturbing, equivalent to John Carpenter's The Thing,
Mhm.
and I've just really loved that approach. And I thought, it was a very interesting use of the monster in terms of a way of you know ex, externalizing uh, the word our own worst thoughts
Mhm.
of people. So talk about using the supernatural setting in both Sandman and Slim and in this as a means of externalizing, the worst aspects of the world that I mean, heck, all you had to do was watch the meeting at the White House yesterday to see
Right.
something equally bad.
Yeah, well, hey, the White House meeting was a perfect one to look at. I mean, in terms of who are the people in charge? Who are the real power players here? The fact that someone like the president could just brush off a murder and dismemberment so easily tells you a lot about power. And that's the way I approach it in my books is there are those people who give the orders, and then there were the people who carry them out. Because, when you think about people in power want something bad done, and there are the lower level schlubs who have to actually go out and execute those terrible orders. And that's a world I find fascinating. So yeah, in the Pale House Devil and in the Flesh King, that is definitely part of what I wanted to write about. And the Flesh King, I even took it a bit further in terms of the character who is his name in the tabloids is the Skinner, but he's also known as the Flesh King. Um, I wanted to portray him as underground. Very few people know about him, but he is in his realm all powerful and has no consideration for anything or anyone. The world is essentially food for him to feed on, and that for his own survival. And but he's made that into a game because I think that's the other part of power is when you have essentially unlimited power, it can't just be about keeping control. At a certain point, that power and the evil you can perpetrate has to become fun on some level. And I like trying to see that through those people's eyes, where murder becomes a game for them. And that's who a lot of my villains, that's where a lot of my villains come out of, that attitude. They don't all operate the same way, but that ease of power that makes, the world their little table tennis game. And you just bat things and people back and forth forever.
Now you are invested in a new series. It's got its own name, the Discrete Eliminators. We have two novels. And you also went back. We are awaiting the 13th, is it Sandman Slim
Yes.
novel? What
Yes.
made you go back to that character? I'm just really curious. We all love him, so no problem. But uh, what drew you to that a new story?
Yeah, I thought I was done telling Stark stories, Sandman Slim stories of book 12, where I felt like I'd closed out James Stark's story. And what, it's been like 3 years, I suppose, 3 years since I think the last book came out, King Bullet, and which means 4 years since I wrote a Sandman Slim novel. And I thought that was it. And then earlier this year, late last year, just this weird idea popped into my head for Stark's next story. And I wasn't sure if it was real or not. And I kept turning it over in my brain. And I realized there was something there. And it was a story I wanted to tell. And I think people who like Sandman Slim will want to hear from his point of view. So yeah, there was one more, and I swear up and down, it is the last Sandman Slim I will ever write. I mean, I want to write some stories. It is the last Sandman Slim novel I will ever write. There will be stories. I've written one solo story for Candy. I've written one solo story for Carlos at the bar, and there will be more coming.
Well, we all love Sam and Slim, and I think one of the things that make that series so appealing is the voice of the character. Uh, You alluded to him being somewhat stripped down, and I would say that that's right. But his voice is so much fun, and so I'm wondering, talk about creating the voices of the characters in this new novel. In particular, I think you did a great job with Tilda, who's a wonderful addition.
Yeah, a lot of the, honest to God, a lot of the uh, reason I created the second book, The Flesh King, was to give Tilda the agency she was denied in the first book. In The Pale House Devil, she is completely under the thumb of her grandfather. She has no power, no real life because he controls everything. And she does her best to help out Ford and Neuland, in their supernatural quest. But at the same time, she is frightened at every moment that she's going to do something her grandfather disapproves of. So when I wrote the follow-up and I knew Tilda was going to be a big part of it, I wanted to basically take her out of her old environment, put her somewhere new with Ford and Neuland, and let her loose, let her find herself for the first time in her life. And that's why the book starts off with a Tilda scene, learning to shoot, learning to shoot a gun. And, they Ford and Owen have taken her under their wing and they are teaching her the business, and she is an equal partner. And in fact, as the story goes along, she becomes indispensable to the story, to the story and to their partnership. And I really, yeah, a lot of this, for all the stuff that's going on, a lot of this is Tilda's story.
It's really fun, and she is as well. You moved from California to New York in this with this story,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering, talk about that relocation. Did that have to do with your own peregrinations, or was that where the store took you? And will you stay there?
Yeah, I moved to New York a couple of years ago, and I'm from New York originally.
Mm.
Um, and I haven't written much about it. The only other big New York project I did was The Dead Take the A Train, a book I wrote with Cassandra Caw.
A
And
lovely
I
book.
really enjoy writing about New York. And so when it came time to write The Flesh King, yeah, I wanted to I mean, Ford and Norman are from New York, and they were only in California because of, bad circumstances in their life. So in the second book, I wanted to take them back home, and I wanted Tilda to go with them. So she's in a new environment, they're back in their old environment, and it was a great chance to write about New York City itself because LA is a power center, but New York also being a power center, but it's a completely different kind of power than you find in a place like LA. It's it's old world, old money power. LA is about fame power and the power and nouveau riche approach to money and things, whereas New York is old money. It is the power of the finance system. It is the underground power that controls the levers of government and finance for the whole country. So that's another fun thing to write about.
One of the things I really love about your books is your ability to write about two things in the same scene, in that these books are really, powerful statements in a sense about class and about the way, money works in America, how the poor get poorer, the rich get richer, everybody else gets dumped on. Um, Talk about dealing with that concept in this world, but translate it through your own supernatural lens so you have a world of warlocks, witches, devils, and especially monsters. God, I love your monsters. I'm a monster fan, so I'm right there with all of these books.
Well, especially in Sandman Slim, I had the real underclass of LA, and those are called the lurkers. And those are the sort of supernatural creatures that no one talks about and no one cares about. They're the kind of, they're the monsters who have to go to a monster-free clinic, when they get hurt. And the character Allegra takes care of them there. And the lurkers will, hang out in Stark's favorite bar, Bamboo House of Dolls, but they are the real underclass of Los Angeles supernatural world. And I wanted to tell some of their stories, and I want to tell more of them now that I finished the book series. But I've always, anywhere there's a human underclass, I know in terms of supernatural circumstances, there is going to be the supernatural underclass, the monsters, the ghosts, the werewolves, vampires, whatever you want to have, who just, they aren't the sexy Anne Rice vampires. You know what I mean?
No, no, I like these better, a lot better.
Yeah, they're the ones who are, you know, one group is literally a bunch of grease monkeys. They work at a mechanic shop. My version of werewolves. One group of them literally just run a chop shop, and that's how they make their living. I mean, not every monster is 1,000 years old and has collected gold for all that time. Some of them are
Hmm.
just working stiffs who have to get by. Some of them, sell their souls after death, um, so that they, one, don't have to go to hell, but also can just keep working.
Well, too.
Blue sky, there are the blue sky contracts where, you can sign up with a talent agency. And if you're famous enough, or even, if you're a B or C level or an A level, dead person, you can keep right on working after you're dead. And sometimes that gets tedious, but you sign the contract.
Well, one of the things that I think the reason I love your monsters is that because the monster ever since the movie Jaws, which was of course a great movie and very enjoyable, but since then monsters have lost character. They're human characters, and all they are is quote killing machines.
Mm,
Your monsters are not killing machines, as you were describing the worlds. They are working stiffs. They have jobs. They have things to do. They're hungry. It's not like they live in luxury. They often live in filth and think, well, that's luxury to them. And I think the idea of turning humans, the human refuse and the human good things inside out and having those inside out show is really an interesting way to write novels that have, a strong political message without ever once mentioning politics, class, or any of that stuff. It's just good fun reading that when you think about it, goes, oh, yeah, hell yes.
That goes back to my very first novel. My very first book is called Metrophage. It is a cyberpunk science fiction novel. And in that, I mean, again, I'm dealing with class, I'm dealing with the underclass, and it's a very political book. It's a different kind of politics. But again, I want to deal with that stuff, but I never want to lecture. I just want to have people in certain circumstances and never talk about the politics that undergirds the story. But I don't see how you can write without being aware. You can't tell these stories without being aware of politics and class and money and how they change everything. So that if you're writing about the supernatural world, yeah, I mean, if they're going to exist in this world, their money is an issue. What neighborhood you're in is an issue. All that stuff. And you don't, again, I don't believe you have to stop, and give your lecture about it. Just have the people living their lives and putting it out there. And I think people, even unconsciously, will pick up what I'm talking about and what the characters are talking about. You don't have to make, you don't have to make it explicit. You don't have to just throw it out in the text. You can have it just underneath everything.
Well, I think that for me at least, reading is a form of meditation because you're
Hmm.
just sitting there thinking and you're thinking a coherent stream. And the kind of meditations that one has in your books, on one hand, it's a hell of fun to read. Make no mistake about it. The pages turn, you love it, and you regret it when they're gone. But also, you also, because it's a meditation, you're thinking about it. And I think that you you can lead a reader to consider circumstances that they might not otherwise consider, and have fun at the same time, which I think is just all around a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm making everything sound very serious and I'm maybe even dour, but
Oh no,
I
it's not.
feel
They're
like
funny.
there's a lot of humor in all the books, and that's very deliberate.
Hmm.
Um, because I write about a lot of characters who dwell in, violent circumstances, and I've known cops, I've known EMT people, and they have the darkest, blackest senses of humor just to get through the day. And I wanted to bring that to Sandman Slim, to, Palace Devil, to the Flesh King, because those people are working in very intense, very violent, very dark circumstances. But you have to acknowledge, like, funny stuff happens and they're aware of it. They're just not going to necessarily see it in the same way as a regular person. And the other part of that is I really discovered that when I was writing the very first Sandman Slim book. I wrote like 6 openings for that book. The first couple were dead serious, and they were horrible. They didn't work at all. Um, it's like, who would want to read about this character? He just sounds awful. And then I let him have that dark sense of humor, and suddenly he came alive. And I realized that's the other, I realized he came alive, plus the kind of violence that was going to run through that series. I discovered you can chop off as many heads as you want in a story as long as you make it funny. And that was my big revelation, is just, yeah, if you're gonna cut off a head, let it be funny. And that changed everything for me.
That's your t-shirt slogan.
Yeah.
Now, as I was looking back, we know that Sandman Slim has been optioned. How is that going? Is that going forward, or is that kind of
Yes,
just
it's
oh
there's a new
yay?
script. We have a director and we have a new script that's in development right now. And this has been a long process for a film to come together. There have been several directors and a ton of scripts. And I think we finally found the right combination, both in terms of the talents and point of view of the team right now, plus, I've talked to the director a lot, and he understands. He has a punk background,
Hmm.
so he understands Stark. He understands the world. So I think we're finally at a place where it's going to finally, after several years, come together. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what that new script is going to look like. Because, like I said, I know the director's work. I can't say his name yet, but I think he really has a good sense of LA and these characters in this world they live in.
You know, just how you said LA and the sense of LA, and I was thinking also about the sense of New York, and I think that you do a really good job of contrasting that East and West Coast in your
Mm.
fiction. Do you think you'll be sending your discrete eliminators back to the West Coast? And because I'd love to see a kind of balancing act.
I don't think back to the West Coast. I have an idea to send them somewhere else that will change. I want to change our circumstances a lot again, but it won't be the coast. Where I'm thinking of sending them is a very different place. Then they're going to have to learn to deal with that too.
One of the scenes I thought worked really well in this is when the when all the various crime lords, supernatural and not, come to Ford and Neuland's house, um, to see them and give them the job of dealing with this the Flesh King. So talk about creating that scene because it was so much fun to read because it's like a classic scene in a noir movie or a noir novel. Yet it has this wonderful feeling of monsterness and the supernatural.
I try to mix those things together a lot and to also do it in a way where these things are normalized,
Mm,
where
right.
everyone, again, this is only exists in the underground crime world of New York. So everyone in that world knows what's going on, that there are, you know, um, supernatural entities in the crime world. So they're not perfectly comfortable with each other, but they work together. And they understand that, this guy over here, he's just an old school crook. Whereas this gang over here, well, they're all revenants. They are no longer alive and they have their own code that they work by. And I wanted to write that in a way where it's completely natural. Everyone understands everyone else. Again, it's the old school, law of gangland, especially East Coast gangland, where you have a whole bunch of gangs, but they have to coexist or they're going to destroy each other. They're going to bring down the cops, the feds, everyone on top of them. So they can't cause too much trouble, among the gangs. And in fact, at the beginning of the Flesh King, the reason that meeting takes place between these supernatural gangs, the human gangs, and Ford and Neuland and Tilda is because there's this serial killer in town they know he's supernatural. The police don't know it yet. But what the gangs know is this guy's causing enough trouble that it's pulling down a lot of heat on the crime world. And they blackmail Ford, Neuland, and Tilda into dealing with this killer. Basically, in the first book, they kind of ruined their reputation in New York by doing something during a job. And so to get back in with that East Coast crime world, it's like you take care of this serial killer and you're back in. You're part of our world again. And again, because we have to take the heat off from the cops, the feds, the politicians in town, because this guy is out of control. And his murders aren't normal murders. They are awful. They are the kind of thing that shocks even New Yorkers. So that kind of criminal mind to me makes perfect sense, and to sort of put it with regular people, with supernatural creatures, everyone has to get along. That's just the way business works.
As you are explaining that, I realized that, I grokked all that as I read the scene, but it's amazing. I think the skill of this book is that it takes very complicated situations and renders and gives us just like, the slightest pokes through the surface. But we as readers get to put all that stuff together. And that's really, the fun part of reading a book like this is to be able to understand the background of the crime, the background of the killer, and slowly put it together just behind the author who's always, one, two steps ahead. As you were reading, and there's also, this book includes a lot of information about Gunner Jews. And so talk about, did you make these new rules up as you went, or where are they in a notebook somewhere, a Bible you have, so to speak?
I have a Bible for all the big projects. Yeah.
Mm.
which I don't update nearly enough. When I was writing the later Sandman Slim books, I had to do a lot of research on my own work to like, I want to mention this guy. Is he alive or dead? And I had to literally go back through some of the old books because it wasn't in my notes whether I'd killed him or not. But you know, I do have a lot of the stuff, those details worked out in advance. I don't know how they're going to fit into the stories. I mean, I know a lot more about these worlds than you do. I have so many notes uh, on both Sandman Slim worlds and um, the Discrete Eliminators world that I don't even know if it's ever going to make it onto the page. I need to know it. You don't necessarily need to know it. So, but I needed to know the stories of these characters that aren't being told. I'm going to tell, in the next book, we're going to get a little more into the background of one of the main characters. We know a bit about Tilda's background. We now know a bit about Neuland's background. We're gonna learn a little more background about one of the other characters. But I don't want to just sort of lay these things out. You should be able to put some of this together yourself. I like to give people enough to run with, but let them fill in a lot of the gaps themselves. Uh, for instance, in Sandman Slim, I never describe Stark. I say he's pale and he has scars. That's it. You are invited to make Stark anything you want beyond that. I describe some of the other characters. I didn't describe Stark, and I will never describe Stark. People ask me who should play Stark in the movie. I won't even talk about that because if I say an actor, it's going to color the way the readers see Stark in the books. So I'm never going to tell you what Stark looks like to me. Same thing with a lot of my other work. I like to leave room for people to fill in those gaps themselves, give you enough to work with, but to let you play too. Um, I just think handing people every single thing isn't fun for the writer or the reader. Let people play in that world. Let people have their own world. As much as I know the world, as much as I write down the world, let you have your own version of that world.
Well, that's it. It gets to the joy of reading because a good book is like a screenplay for a movie, and as you read it, you get to be the director, the art director, the production director, and hire all the actors, create them whole out of whole cloth in your imagination, and that's the joy of reading. And the best writers do exactly what you're talking about, which is to allow the reader to put it together themselves, but give them the right fodder.
Yeah.
Now, um, you also spend some time doing music.
Hmm.
I have your first two CDs. I just absolutely love those. They're
Oh, thanks.
just wonderful. I play Friends in the Forest early and often on my weekly show, but it's a
Oh,
show
nice.
from 11 to midnight, so I need to have the more. I try to keep the music a little more upbeat. So,
Right.
are you working on a new record with your collaborator or alone or both?
We're both right now. We're both working on. Um, BC is working on some solo stuff right now. He has a couple of big projects going.
Hmm.
I'm working on the band is a Demon in Fun City, and I'm working on some new tunes for that right now that are very, they're in their early stages. And the way we do that is we work in Logic Pro, and then we just trade files back and forth. We just bounce things back and forth until we both like where the piece is, and then we have a mixer that we sometimes work with, and he will put together the final touches on the tune. So we're both working, and in fact, I just sent out a couple of you know, early versions of some new music to people on my Patreon.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm still working on stuff. I'm also doing because we're both because BC and I are both working on other big projects right now, and music takes so much time. I'm also, I spent many, many years as a photographer, especially back on the West Coast, and I'm doing more photography these days because it's unlike music that just takes forever. Um, Photography for me it's a quicker, simpler thing to work with. I have a new travel camera, so I can start shooting again when I'm on the road. And I like working with models. I mean, I've been shooting, you know, I worked with models for years, and then COVID kind of made all that crash and burn. And I've been, slowly getting back into working with people again. I really miss that. In fact, I hope this coming weekend, I'm going to a horror convention in Oklahoma, and I'm hoping that while I'm there, I've talked to some folks about working with them when I'm in town. So I hope to be able to shoot there with human beings instead of shooting buildings and trees and my cat all the time. So that I think was good is going to be a lot of fun. And I really miss photography. It is
Uh,
again, I kind of made my living at it many years ago, and
oh, really?
it's close to my heart. One thing I love about music and photography, because when BC and I work together in A Demon and Fun City, we don't do lyrics. It's all instrumentals because writing is all about words. But with music and photography, they're both creative forms, but there are no words involved. And that's what makes me happy doing them. Because sometimes, like when I finish a book, my head is so full of words, I can't think anymore. So when I go to something like photography, the way I am right now, I get to be creative, but give the words a rest. Let them kind of recede for a while into my unconscious. And because that's where a lot of good stuff happens when not in your conscious mind, when you're just sort of letting ideas percolate in the dark. And then when they're ready, they come back to you. And I mean, there's a project no one knows about that I'm working on, a book and film project. And that, I wasn't consciously thinking about that for a long time, but all of a sudden, all these ideas about it are flooding back to me. So I've been making a lot of notes about that horror project while shooting, and I love working that way. I think the unconscious is an indispensable tool for writing and really all art, but for me specifically for writing, I get stuck on an idea and I will, honestly, God, one of the best things I can do, if I get stuck on something, I'll go take a nap.
Mm.
Some friends of mine will take showers, they'll go for a walk. For me, lying down, when I say take a nap, I don't mean like going fully asleep. There's that kind of twilight sleep you can get into where you're not fully immersed in sleep. You're just kind of skimming along the top. And
I doing the Dagwood.
is that what that's called?
That's what I call it. It's when you lay on the couch, kind of curled up like this, and you close your eyes, but you don't really need to sleep. You just kind of need to like stop.
Yes, that's exactly what I do. And I'll do that in the afternoon. And 99% of the time, the solution appears. I just stop thinking about it. My unconscious is a lot smarter than my conscious brain. And the solution almost always presents itself, in the hour or so I lie down. So that's just closing my eyes and lying down with my cat for an hour, you know, often changes a book or a script completely.
Well, too, I was when you were talking about music, one of the things I think that about music, particularly instrumental music, is
Mhm.
that music is a high bandwidth tool for communication.
Yeah.
2, 3 notes, 3 seconds, 10 seconds of music can convey to you a whole bunch of information, put you in a mood, make you see something, make you think something in a way that words, images, films, anything else just can't do. Music
Hmm.
is a unique form of communication, and I think that what you are describing is going between writing and music and photography. eh, to a sense, to a certain extent, I think it's like seeing the cloud. There's a cloud in your brain somewhere that's a novel, and it's just forming. And then you see it by listening to music, playing music, taking
Hmm.
pictures. Then all of a sudden, you have that rainstorm is ready, and the words are ready to come out.
Yeah, it's very much that way, and often it's the same. Music can be that way too. I mean, I have the band with BC called Demon and Fun City. I have my solo music project called Seven Bloodstained Orchids, which is I stole from an old Italian giallo movie. And both of those often come out of, again, an unconscious process. I will start with a very basic musical idea. Sometimes as simple as I have a mood and I like this. I like writing in C sharp minor, and it can be as simple as that. It's like here's a mood. I want to play in this key. Let's see what happens. And I'll just start. I'll open Logic Pro and I will just start poking at things. You know, and sometimes I'll have notes. You know, not even melodies, just chord changes scrawled on a piece of paper. I used to read music years ago, and my brain is kind of vapor locked on reading regular music anymore. I mean, I was a piano student for a million years, and
You had
something
a
that,
Rhodes.
pardon?
At one point, I believe you had a Rhodes,
Yes.
electric piano.
But I
I
can't,
just left for those, the latest
uh,
one is like 10, 12 grand. And I think, oh God, if I bought
yeah.
that, it'd take up so much room in the house, my wife would just kill me.
Yeah, I used to have a Les Paul Jr. guitar, which is what Johnny Thunders played. I got it for
Hmm.
$300 in the pawn shop. Someone stole it, and now I think they go for around $5,000. So I'm still bitter about that.
Mm.
But in terms of reading, you read regular music, you read horizontally, right,
Hmm.
across the page. I can't read that kind of music anymore. I write it vertically.
Mm.
For some reason, that's the way my brain works these days. It's like it's just rejected all the old systems. So if I write down a chord progression, it goes from top to the bottom of the page. I can't do it across anymore, and I don't know why. But whatever my weird little system is, it works. We have two albums out, so my solo album plus the Demon and Fun Cities album, and we're and doing more work along the way. So with any art, find your own way to do it, right? If there are no rules. As long as what you're doing works, there are no rules. Do it the way you need to do it. That's all.
In our band long ago, we used to say, if it sounds good, it must be right.
There you go. That's all you need. If doesn't matter how you got there, just matters what you got in the end.
And in terms of sounding good, I would like to mention that if, as I recall, when you work in Logic, that is all you use. You don't have like a room chock a block with electronic junk in it, do you?
I have a couple of keyboards that I've been playing with, and I
Oh,
realize I don't like them. I I have a couple of really big ones, and they just don't appeal to me anymore. What I have now that I work with is, I have a couple of little tiny keyboards. I have an Arturia little MIDI keyboard, and I have I forget the other brand, and that's really all I use. They have no onboard sounds.
the
I- we're
T-Step
literally
Pro.
talking about we're literally talking about a keyboard that's maybe 2 octaves,
Hmm.
and because it fits on my desk, if I hold out the huge keyboard, it becomes very cumbersome. And I realized, again, the way often in my prose, I'm trying to strip things down. The way I work in music, I'm also stripping things down. So I found that, little 2-octave keyboard where I can, I have buttons where I can shift the octave if I want to go lower or higher. That's all I need. Um,
Mm.
I like I like the ability to keep things small and concentrated. And Robert Fripp had a phrase for it, something like an extremely small mobile unit, something like
Mm.
that. And that's kind of how I like to approach music these days, is keep it small, keep it simple, but when you get into actually playing it, it can become anything it wants. It can get as elaborate and layered as it wants, but the tools to get in there uh, are simple. I do want to buy, next year I'm thinking about buying a guitar and a bass again because I miss playing stringed instruments,
Mm.
but I have no interest in playing them in a normal manner. I have some experiments I want to do with stringed instruments that may not make sense to anybody else, but I want to do the experiments and see what comes out of them.
There's a company called Soma that makes a really interesting stringed instrument that is just a wooden cross, kind of like an upside down cross
Hmm.
with four strings, so you can play it like a cello. You can pluck it or you can play it like with a
Hmm.
bow as well. What
Interesting.
called the Divina,
Davina.
Divina.
I'll have to check that out.
Look it up. It's fun, but I have to say one thing. I love the sounds on your albums. I just think they're so clear and beautiful and wonderfully orchestrated, both sparse and luxuriant, which is hard to do in that format.
Thanks. I mean, I'm learned, God, BC is the king of that. I've learned so much from working with him on that stuff. I mean, he has much more experience in terms of, he's done a lot of soundtrack work. So
Mm.
he's the one I've learned from in how to layer things and get complexity while working simply. And that's what he's really, really taught me along the way. And I think what's one of the things that's made our music together interesting in a way that is not like our music that we do separately.
Oh,
So the band, A Demon in Fun City has its own sound that's not
mhm.
like either of our own work.
Well, the way you described the music complexity through simplicity, I think also describes your fiction as well.
Ah, I'll take that. I like that. I mean, yeah, it's kind of how I guess it's how I work. I mean, even when I do photography, I try to keep that as simple as possible. I usually work with a single light. I'll have a little I'll bounce it. I have a little bounce reflector that I'll use sometimes, but even with shooting pictures, I really like to keep things small and simple when I travel and when I'm even shooting in a studio. That's just it's just how I see art. You know, do the physical part of the art simply and then let the complexity come out later.
The new novel by Richard Kadrey is The Flesh King. It's the second in the Discrete Eliminators series. Thank you for joining me, Richard.
Thanks. This was a lot of fun.
It's been a pleasure.